Welcome back, learners. It's time for your deep dive. Today is March 27th, 2025, and this is part one of our daily UPSC Current Affairs series. So if you are prepping for those exams, you are definitely in the right place. We've got a lot to cover today.
Yeah, we do. We've been sifting through a mountain of articles, research reports, all sorts of stuff.
Our own notes, even.
Exactly. All to bring you the absolute essentials for your UPSC prep. We'll be touching upon international forums, space exploration.
Oh, and some environmental concerns, economic policies.
We've even got some legislative updates in there.
It's a pretty comprehensive deep dive today. Now, some of these topics might sound familiar, and that's okay. Think of it as, a good, solid revision session.
Always good to refresh those key concepts and facts.
All right, so let's jump right in. Our first topic is the Commission on Genetic Resources for Food and Agriculture. They just wrapped up their 20th meeting in Rome.
This commission, it's a pretty big deal.
Absolutely. It's the main international forum for governments to really get together and hammer out the decisions about genetic resources for food and agriculture.
And what's really interesting about it is how it's evolved over time. It was first established by the FAO way back in 1983, and the initial focus was really on plenty genetic resources. But now it's become this central hub for everything.
You mean like animals, forests, aquatic life, even those tiny but mighty microbial and invertebrate genetic resources?
Precisely. It's about recognizing the full spectrum of biodiversity that underpins our entire food system.
And it's not just about, preserving these resources in isolation. This commission really grapples with all those crucial interconnected issues, like food security, of course.
Absolutely. And also human health and nutrition, how we adapt to climate change, even mitigate it using these genetic resources. And of course, there's the whole debate around access to these resources and how benefits are shared, including, those derived from digital sequence information.
Right. And the commission has a global reach, 179 member countries, including India.
One of their big achievements, and something really important for UPSC aspirants to understand, is the International Treaty on Plant Genetic Resources for Food and Agriculture. You might know it as ITPG-RFA. It was adopted back in 2001.
That's a landmark agreement for sure.
It's significant for several reasons. First, it formally recognizes the huge contribution of farmers all over the world to the diversity of crops that we all depend on. Second, it set up a global system to make sure farmers, breeders, and scientists can access this massive pool of plant genetic material.
That's a huge step towards collaboration.
Exactly. And third, it aims to ensure that when benefits come from using these resources, they're shared fairly and equitably with the countries where those resources came from.
Right. Benefit sharing is a big deal in international agreements like this.
Absolutely.
Oh.
And as we mentioned earlier, it's not just plants. The Commission was also instrumental in developing the Global Plan of Action for Animal Genetic Resources back in 2007. So they're looking at the whole picture,
Right, recognizing the interconnectedness of all these different types of genetic resources for our future food security.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's shift gears a bit now. From the ground, let's turn our attention to the skies.
To space.
You got it. We're talking about the Euclid Space Telescope. It's part of ESA's Cosmic Vision program.
And it's been sending back some truly jaw-dropping images of galaxies of all shapes and sizes.
Incredible stuff. Now, this telescope gets its name from Euclid of Alexandria, that ancient Greek mathematician.
The father of geometry.
Exactly. So tell us, what's this Euclid Space Telescope all about?
Well, it's on a mission to tackle some of the biggest mysteries in cosmology: dark energy and dark matter.
Oh, those are big ones.
They really are. It was launched on a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket and is now orbiting at Lagrange Point 2. That's a point about 1.5 million kilometers from Earth.
Kind of a gravitational sweet spot, right?
Yep, exactly. And it gives the telescope a very stable observation platform, meaning it needs minimal fuel to stay there. It's got a minimum operational lifespan of 6 years, which is great because it's got a lot of work to do.
And what about the images themselves?
Oh, they're incredible. The image quality is supposedly 4 times sharper than what we can get from ground-based telescopes.
Yeah.
This is crucial for its mission, which is to map the universe's large-scale structure in 3D.
That sounds ambitious.
It is. To achieve this, it's got a couple of key instruments. First, there's the Visible Wavelength Camera, or VIS for short. That's its high-resolution camera for capturing those detailed images of galaxies.
So it's like the telescope's eye.
In a way, yes. Then there's the Near-Infrared Spectrometer and Photometer, or NISP. Think of this one as a cosmic speedometer. It measures how fast galaxies are moving away from us.
I see. And this data helps us understand the influence of dark energy on the universe's expansion, right?
Exactly. And it's worth noting that NASA actually contributed to NISP. It's a really good example of international collaboration in space exploration.
Absolutely. Collaboration is key in these big scientific endeavors. So, what are the implications of all this for our understanding of the universe?
Well, for starters, a deeper understanding of dark energy and dark matter could totally revolutionize our understanding of how the universe began and where it's headed.
Those are pretty fundamental questions.
They are. And Euclid is expected to collect a massive amount of data. I mean, we're talking about surveying 1.5 billion galaxies over its 6-year mission, covering about a third of the entire sky.
Whoa, that's a lot of galaxies.
It is. And the early observations from the Deep Field South region alone have already revealed something like 26 million galaxies. Some of them are over 10.5 billion light years away.
Mind-blowing.
Yeah.
So what's next for Euclid?
Well, the first cosmology data release is expected in October 2026. That's definitely something to keep an eye on. It could lead to some groundbreaking discoveries, potentially even challenging some of our current assumptions about cosmology.
Exciting times. From the vast expanse of space, let's now zoom in on something a bit closer to home. Our own sun.
Ah, yes. The Parker Solar Probe.
This incredible little probe just made its closest approach to the sun yet.
On March 22nd, 2025, it got within 6 million kilometers of the sun's surface.
6 million kilometers. That's unbelievably close.
It is. And, the Parker Solar Probe was launched back in 2018, and its mission is to get closer to the sun than any spacecraft before it. It'll make a total of 24 close approaches throughout its mission.
It's truly remarkable what we can achieve with technology these days.
Absolutely. The goal of the Parker Solar Probe is to study the sun's corona, the solar wind, and its magnetic field.
And why is that so important?
Well, understanding these things is crucial for understanding space weather. And space weather can have a big impact on things here on Earth.
You mean like our satellites, communication systems, even our power grids?
Exactly. So to get closer to the sun, the probe follows a highly elliptical orbit, using Venus's gravity to sort of slingshot itself closer with each pass.
Clever. So how fast is this thing going?
Well, it's currently the fastest human-made object, clocking in at a speed of around 692,000 kilometers per hour.
Wow, that's mind-bogglingly fast.
It is. And to withstand the incredible heat and radiation near the sun, it's got a special 4.5-inch thick carbon composite heat shield. Plus, it's carrying a bunch of scientific instruments like fields, which measures electric and magnetic fields, and ISO, which observe those energetic particles shooting out from the sun.
And what about WHISPER? I remember reading something about that.
Oh, right. WHISPER is for imaging the corona and the solar wind. It's basically the probe's camera. And then there's the Faraday cup, which directly measures the particles in the solar wind.
So what have we learned so far from the Parker Solar Probe?
Well, some of the key findings include the discovery of these magnetic switchbacks in the solar wind, which are these sudden reversals in the magnetic field. They've also found these dust-free zones close to the sun, which was unexpected.
And let's not forget that in 2021, it became the first spacecraft to actually touch the sun, entering its corona. That's a pretty historic achievement.
It really is. Now, if we compare the Parker Solar Probe to India's Aditya L1 mission, which is stationed further away at Lagrange point L1, we can see that they take different but complementary approaches to studying the sun.
Right, Aditya L1 is more about continuously observing the sun from a distance, whereas the Parker Solar Probe is all about getting up close and personal.
Exactly. Both are incredibly important for giving us a complete picture of how the sun affects our solar system.
All right, let's shift gears again and talk about something a bit more down-to-earth: economic policy.
Sounds good.
So the government of India recently decided to discontinue those medium-term and long-term government deposits, also known as MLTGD, under the gold monetization scheme. This takes effect on March 26, 2025. Now, this scheme was originally launched back in November 2015 to encourage people and institutions to deposit their idle gold with banks and earn interest on it.
It was a way to try and mobilize the huge amounts of gold that are just sitting idle in households and institutions across India.
Exactly. The idea was to bring that gold into the formal economy and reduce our dependence on gold imports.
Which, as you know, has a big impact on our current account deficit.
Absolutely. So under the GMS, there were different types of deposits. You had those short-term gold deposits for 1 to 3 years. The gold deposited under those could be used by the banks, and you could redeem it in either gold or cash.
Then there were the medium-term gold deposits for 5 to 7 years, and the long-term gold deposits for 7 to 12 years.
Right. And those longer-term deposits were meant for the government and the RBI to use for managing gold reserves and monetary policy, but redemption was only possible in cash for those.
Now, what's interesting is that the government has also discontinued the sovereign gold bond scheme, which was another initiative aimed at reducing the demand for physical gold.
It seems like there's a bit of a shift happening in the government's approach to gold.
Maybe they're rethinking how best to manage gold in the Indian economy.
Well, it'll be interesting to see what new strategies they come up with.
Absolutely. It's a dynamic situation.
Okay, so let's move on to some environmental news.
Sure.
There are some interesting developments happening in Karnataka, where they're getting ready for a soft release of some captured elephants into the Bhadra Wildlife Sanctuary.
Bhadra. A beautiful place.
It is. It's located in the Chikamagaluru and Shivamogga districts of Karnataka and is named after the Bhadra River that flows through it. It was declared a wildlife sanctuary back in 1951 and later became a Project Tiger Reserve in 1998.
Bhadra was actually the first tiger reserve in India to completely relocate all villages from its core area.
That was back in 2002. A major achievement in conservation.
It really was. And the sanctuary itself is incredibly diverse. You've got hills, valleys, different types of forests, from moist deciduous to dry deciduous, and even shola forests.
And the wildlife is incredible too. Tigers, leopards, elephants, over 250 bird species.
It's a haven for biodiversity.
So tell us more about this soft release of elephants. How does it work?
Well, they've created this large enclosure, about 20 square kilometers within the sanctuary, and it's secured with railway barricades.
I see. And why railway barricades?
Well, they're sturdy and effective at containing the elephants, and it also allows for monitoring and observation.
Makes sense. So how did they choose this specific spot for the enclosure?
They had to consider a few things. The site needs to have enough water and food for the elephants. It needs to be well connected to the surrounding forest so the elephants can disperse easily once they're released. And perhaps most importantly, there needs to be very little human activity in the area.
Right, to minimize stress on the elephants and let them get used to their natural environment.
Exactly. And once the elephants are in the enclosure, they'll be monitored by vets, but there's a strict no human interaction policy.
So they're basically left alone to acclimatize before they're fully released.
That's right. The enclosure gate will be opened after a few months, allowing them to freely roam the sanctuary.
It's a really thoughtful and meticulous approach to wildlife management.
It is. It shows how much our understanding of conservation has evolved. We're moving away from those more interventionist approaches and focusing more on allowing animals to adapt and thrive in their natural habitats.
It's also a good reminder of the importance of minimizing human-wildlife conflict, especially for large mammals like elephants.
Absolutely. We need to ensure they have safe and viable habitats if they are to survive.
Okay, now let's talk about something completely different. The Lok Sabha recently passed the Boilers Bill 2024, which is set to replace the century-old Boilers Act of 1923.
Wow, a 100-year-old law. Times have definitely changed.
They have. The old act focused on regulating the manufacture, installation, operation, and repair of steam boilers, primarily for safety reasons.
Which makes sense. Boilers can be dangerous if not properly handled.
Exactly. There were some amendments made in 2007 to incorporate third-party inspections, but it was clear that more comprehensive reform was needed.
So what does this new bill change?
Well, it's aligned with the Jan Vishwas Act of 2023, which emphasizes decriminalization and ease of doing business. So they've decriminalized 3 out of the 7 offenses listed in the 1923 Act.
What happens to those offenses now?
They're now handled with fiscal penalties through an executive mechanism. But don't worry, the 4 major offenses that pose a serious risk to life and property, those still carry criminal penalties.
Good to know they're still taking safety seriously.
Absolutely. The new bill also focuses on enhancing worker safety inside boilers and mandates that repairs and alterations be done only by qualified personnel.
Makes sense. You don't want just anyone tinkering with a boiler.
Right. They've also used clearer and more modern legal language in the new bill, removing some of the outdated provisions that were hanging around from the pre-independence era.
It's always good to have laws that are clear and up to date.
Definitely. And another important update is that the roles of the central and state governments, as well as the Central Boilers Board, have been more clearly defined.
So they should help streamline things.
Exactly. Now, for those preparing for UPSC, remember that Boilers fall under the concurrent list of the Constitution, meaning both the central and state governments have the power to make laws about them.
It's a shared responsibility.
Exactly. All right, moving on. Let's talk about how technology is changing the way our legislative bodies function.
That's good.
Delhi recently became the 28th legislature in India to adopt the National e-Vitan application.
NEVA.
Right, NEVA. It's an online platform designed to digitize the entire legislative process.
So it's like taking all those paper files and putting them online.
In essence, yes, but it's much more than that. It's a device-neutral and member-centric application, which means MLAs and MLCs can access all sorts of information directly on their phones or tablets.
So things like member contact details, rules of procedure, the daily list of business, bills, questions, committee reports, all that stuff is readily available at their fingertips.
Precisely. And it's not just for the legislators themselves. It also helps government departments in their interactions with the legislature and assists the chair in conducting proceedings smoothly.
It sounds like it could really increase transparency and efficiency.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And by hosting it on the Meghraj National Cloud, they're ensuring that it's secure and reliable.
It's a great example of how technology can be used to modernize and streamline governance.
Right. And think about the potential for increased citizen engagement.
Yeah.
If people can easily access information about what's happening in their state legislature, they can be more informed and involved in the democratic process.
It's about bringing the government closer to the people.
Exactly. Okay, so let's switch gears one last time and talk about a recent natural event. A 6.7 magnitude earthquake recently struck off the coast of New Zealand's South Island.
I saw that in the news.
South Island is the larger of New Zealand's two main islands, and it's known for its dramatic landscapes. You've got the Southern Alps, which include Mount Cook, New Zealand's highest peak.
And Fiordland National Park, a UNESCO World Heritage Site.
Stunning scenery. But this earthquake is a reminder that this region is situated in a seismically active zone. It lies on the boundary between the Pacific and Indo-Australian tectonic plates.
It's a reminder of the powerful forces at work beneath the Earth's surface.
Definitely. And it highlights the importance of disaster preparedness in these regions.
Absolutely. Okay, now for our final topic, let's dive into the world of medical research. Scientists have discovered that an enzyme called BBLDH is crucial for the survival and infectivity of the Lyme disease bacterium, Borrelia burgdorferi.
So this is a significant finding.
It could be. Lyme disease is a serious illness that can affect the skin, heart, brain, and joints. It's spread through the bite of infected deer ticks, also known as black-legged ticks.
And it's important to remember that it doesn't spread directly from person to person or from pets.
Right. It's only transmitted through tick bites.
So back to this enzyme. How could this discovery help us fight Lyme disease?
Well, now that we know BBLDH is essential for the bacteria's survival, we can potentially target it with new drugs or therapies.
So it could lead to new treatment options.
It's definitely a promising avenue for research.
That's great news for the millions of people around the world who are affected by Lyme disease.
It is. It's a global health concern, especially in North America, Europe, and parts of Asia.
And just to recap, the typical symptoms are fever, headache, fatigue, and that characteristic bullseye rash.
Early treatment with antibiotics is usually effective, but if it's left untreated, it can lead to long-term complications.
And unfortunately, there's no vaccine available yet.
Which makes finding new treatments even more important.
Right. Okay, our last stop on today's deep dive takes us back to India, where there's a growing concern about water hyacinth.
Ah, yes, the water hyacinth. Beautiful, but troublesome.
Exactly. It's creating quite a problem, particularly in the Mula River near Holkar Bridge, where it's formed a thick blanket over the water.
Water hyacinth, or Eichhornia crassipes, is native to South America, but is now spread all over the world, except for Antarctica.
It's become one of the world's worst aquatic weeds. It grows incredibly fast and forms these dense mats that choke out other plant life, reduce oxygen levels in the water, and block waterways.
It's a real ecological nightmare.
It is. It can even affect irrigation and flood control. It got the nickname Terror of Bengal for a reason.
That's not very flattering.
It's not. But it's important to acknowledge the challenges posed by invasive species like this.
It's a complex issue. On one hand, water hyacinth has some limited uses. It can be used as a biofertilizer, its flowers are attractive, and its fibers can be used to make handicrafts.
It can even be used in phytoremediation to remove pollutants from water.
Right, but these benefits are far outweighed by the damage it causes.
Exactly. So the real challenge is finding effective and sustainable ways to manage its spread and minimize its impact on our ecosystems.
It's a problem that requires innovative solutions.
Excellent.
Well, that concludes our deep dive into today's current affairs. We've covered a lot of ground, from international agreements on genetic resources to the intricacies of space exploration, from the challenges of wildlife conservation to the importance of modernizing legislation and the ever-present threat of invasive species.
It's been quite a journey, and we hope this deep dive has provided you with a clear and concise understanding of the key events and developments that are relevant for your UPSC preparation.
And as always, we encourage you to delve deeper into any of these topics that particularly pique your interest. Don't just take our word for it. Go explore the original sources and form your own opinions.
And to make sure you don't miss any of our future deep dives, be sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that like button.
And before we sign off, here's a final thought for you to ponder. As you continue your studies, think about the connections between all these seemingly disparate topics. How can advancements in space science inform our understanding of our own planet? How do international collaborations address global challenges? And how do local environmental issues have broader implications for sustainable development?
It's all connected. So keep those connections in mind, and best of luck with your UPSC preparation.
Until next time, learners.
Happy studying!